I first noticed Ethan on a grey Monday, when the sky seemed to press down on the school like an extra ceiling. He moved through the front doors with the careful steps of someone trying not to leave footprints. A new backpack hugged his shoulders, too neat, too stiff, the way fresh paper still resists the hand. The hall around him was a river, and he was a small stone trying not to be seen by the current. He kept his eyes on the floor tiles, counting them, maybe, the way you count seconds in the dark. I watched from my locker as he passed the trophy case, where faces in old photos smiled without knowing him. The air carried the chatter of names and inside jokes, threads he could not pick up yet. He seemed to shrink inside his jacket when laughter burst somewhere behind him, a reflex born of other halls, other days. In homeroom he sat near the window, close to the light but not claiming it. The seat was a quiet island. He did not reach for the map of the classroom that most of us learn without thinking. He waited for the bell like a swimmer waits for a calmer wave. When the teacher read the roster, his name sounded like a leaf that had just fallen, soft and almost lost in motion. Ethan answered with a nod, the smallest yes, the kind you give when you are not sure the world is asking kindly. During lunch he hovered at the edge of tables that had carved their borders long before he arrived. The cafeteria smells and noise were a storm, and he tried to walk between the drops. He found a corner near the vending machine and opened a sandwich that looked made for travel rather than comfort. He ate as if chewing might reveal an answer. Every now and then he glanced up, not to be seen, but to check if the room was still safe enough to look down again. There is a weight that memories carry when they are new and raw, a gravity that pulls the shoulders forward and makes the heart speak in whispers. I could see that weight on him. It was in the way he held his notebook, pressed close to his chest like a small shield. It was in the careful lines of his posture, the way you move when you believe the floor could tilt at any moment. He seemed caught between the life that had just closed behind him and the one that had not yet chosen to open. When the afternoon bell finally rang, he lingered by the window, tracing clouds with his gaze. A bus honked outside, distant and patient. He slipped out with the same quiet he carried in, leaving behind only the faint sense of a question. Where do I fit? How do I begin? The hallway swallowed the echo and went on with its usual heartbeat. The next morning carried the same rhythm of footsteps and chatter, but something shifted for Ethan when he walked into the art room. The space was different from the polished hallways, warmer somehow, with the smell of paint and paper filling the air. On the walls hung colors that refused silence, sunsets that lingered, faces with eyes that followed, trees that stretched taller than their canvas would allow. It was here that Mrs. Carter noticed him, her gaze gentle but steady, like a lamp left on in the evening for someone returning home late. She had a way of speaking that softened the room, her words falling slower than most teachers, as though she wanted every syllable to be heard. When she saw Ethan sitting at the back, sketching faint lines in the corner of his notebook, she leaned down and whispered something I couldn't hear. What I saw, though, was the way his hand froze, then slowly began moving again with a little more certainty, like water finding its stream. Over the next days, Mrs. Carter gave him brushes, pastels, and paper without fanfare, just placing them in front of him, as if they already belonged to him. Ethan would sit quietly, drawing shapes at first, nothing that claimed to be anything more than practice. Yet there was a stillness in him when he worked, a quiet focus that seemed to draw a circle round his chair, shutting out the noise of the world. One afternoon, while most students hurried through projects for the grade, Ethan lingered, layering colors on a page until the bell had almost passed. Mrs. Carter didn't rush him. Instead, she stood nearby, her hands folded, and simply said, "You see the world differently. That's not a weakness. That's a gift." Ethan didn't answer, but his shoulders lifted slightly, like a door had opened just enough to let in air. Still, doubt clung to him outside that room. In the cafeteria, whispers followed him. Some kids noticed his drawings and mocked them, saying art was useless or strange. Each word seemed to push him back into his shell. But the art room became a place of return, a small harbor where he could place his thoughts onto canvas. With each painting, he was not only shaping colors but also shaping himself, brick by brick, stroke by stroke. It was Mrs. Carter who finally suggested the school art contest. Ethan hesitated, staring at the entry form like it was a door too heavy to push. His eyes held the fear of being seen, of stepping into light that could expose him. But beneath that fear, something stirred, a fragile belief that maybe, just maybe, the talent Mrs. Carter saw was real. That night, he tucked the form into his bag. It felt less like paper and more like a key he wasn't sure he wanted to turn. The days leading to the contest were heavy with silence for Ethan. He carried his sketchbook everywhere, flipping pages as if searching for the one drawing that could speak for him. At home, his desk became a battlefield of crumpled papers, paint-stained rags, and brushes stiff with drying color. More than once, I saw him pause, staring at the canvas with the look of someone doubting their own reflection. The fear was not of failure alone, was of exposure, of letting the world see the fragile parts of him that had lived in shadows until now. Mrs. Carter's words echoed in his hesitation. She never pressed him, only reminded him that art was not about perfection, but about truth. Ethan held on to that thought like a thread in the dark. Slowly, a piece began to take shape, a quiet forest at dusk, with a single beam of light breaking through the trees. It was simple, but in its simplicity lived something raw. The painting seemed to hold Ethan's own story, the weight of silence, the struggle of change, and the fragile glow of hope refusing to vanish. On the day of the contest, Ethan's hands trembled as he carried the canvas into the hall filled with projects. Bright colors screamed from every corner, loud and confident, while his painting whispered. He placed it on the easel and stepped back, as though separating himself from a piece of his own soul. For a long moment, he stood frozen, ready to retreat before anyone could laugh. But then something unexpected happened. A few students stopped in front of his work. They didn't mock or dismiss it. They lingered. One leaned closer, another tilted their head, and soon a small circle formed. They whispered, not with ridicule but with curiosity. That quiet attention, that pause, was enough. Ethan didn't need their praise. The silence of their looking was its own kind of recognition. When the results were announced, Ethan didn't take first place. His name was called for an honorable mention, a small award that might have seemed insignificant to others. But for him, it was everything. He stood on the stage, holding a certificate that glowed brighter than gold in his hands. His face didn't break into a wide grin, but his eyes carried a light I hadn't seen before, a steady flame, small but certain. That evening, as he packed away his brushes, I caught a glimpse of him in the reflection of the classroom window. He wasn't the boy who counted tiles anymore. He wasn't hiding behind silence. He was a boy who had stepped into the unknown and found something waiting for him there, his own strength. And though tomorrow would bring new challenges, I knew he had discovered a part of himself that could never be taken away. Life has a way of hiding treasures in the places we fear most. For Ethan, it was not victory that mattered, but the courage to let the world see him. His story reminds us that strength is not always loud or celebrated. It is often found in the quiet act of daring to begin. Maybe each of us carries a forest with a light waiting to break through. If this story touched you, share it with someone who might need hope today. And if you'd like more stories like this, I invite you to like, comment, and subscribe.